Before I turn it over to Brené Brown and Kate Crawford to discuss how to stay grounded, courageous, and connected in the midst of AI, we wanted to show you a short piece on our founder, Elizabeth Pepkin. Thank you very much.
It's said that wildflowers don't grow in vases. They are resilient. They don't need to be carefully cultivated. They just keep blooming. When Elizabeth Pepka arrived in Aspen, she understood the beauty of the natural world around her. She cherished it. She looked out at the mountains and the streams and, yes, the wildflowers, and saw it all as a gift she wanted to share with the world. And so, she did. In fact, she's probably the single biggest reason we are all here today. It was Elizabeth who first came to see Aspen in 1939, and despite it being a bit of a ghost town at the time, saved up her wartime rations of gasoline coupons and brought her beloved husband Walter to see it 6 years later.
I brought Walter here because I thought it would be lovely to come up here on trips, an atmosphere you can't find anywhere else. I knew that Walter, who was a builder, would come up here and say, people haven't jobs, and jobs could be provided. And so what do? We try and resurrect a certain life in Aspen and make people happy.
It was Elizabeth who suggested Dr. Albert Schweitzer as the guest of honor at the Goethe Bicentennial in 1949. It was Elizabeth who pressed the formal attire of the performers when they realized there wasn't yet a dry cleaner in the newly rebuilt town. And it was Elizabeth, the grand dame of Aspen, who kept her husband's vision of Aspen as a thriving cultural center alive after his passing. On your walk here this morning, you probably passed by the Elizabeth Pepka Memorial Wildflower Garden. On your way out, take a moment to breathe in the resilient beauty of those wildflowers and let it remind you of their namesake and all she did to bring us here.
I'm very happy about many, many things. All I need to do is to look out on those blue spruce in my garden, in winter hanging with snow, or in the summer, look out on green leaves coming out on the aspen trees and that blue sky and those mountains. And I say, you know, what can be wrong? They can never change.
It's working. We're here, Brené.
We're here.
This is very exciting.
It's nuts. I'm going to warn you right now, there's been a slight programming change. We'll be here for 4 hours and 30 minutes. Because we just met and we are very deep in the honeymoon stage. And we've had one was a 30-minute call before, and then one was just, we ran into each other. And both times the people around us were like, yeah, whatever you're talking about seems interesting, we've got to go. So we are deeply in the honeymoon phase.
But this is what I love about you, Brené, is that your work connects us to all sorts of questions right now. But in artificial intelligence, I was like, okay, so I come from AI, you come from this deep research in thinking about questions that connect us and disconnect us. What are we going to talk about? And I was like, well, maybe we should start by talking about how do we get here? Who are we? What are the questions that motivate us? And why is it that right now we are completely seeing the same phenomena together? So I'm going to let you kick off.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I ran into you yesterday, and we kind of hugged, and it's so nice to meet you in person. And I said, listen, do you have a minute? I'm looking for the name of a construct to explain this really specific issue that we're facing, and it has to do with the three-legged stool of behavior, emotion, and cognition. And Barrett, who's with me, is like, we got to go. And I'm like, no, do you have a construct? She's like, I've got 7. Let's go through them. So you're a researcher and a deep researcher, and I'm very obsessed with your work because I also love history, and you bring this incredible historical, political, and economic lens to your research. I study the intersection of human behavior, emotion, and thinking. And this is kind of the weird, unexpected part. I spend 90% of my time deeply embedded in organizations working with C-suite folks and senior leaders. That's how I spend the majority of my time. Like last night, I put myself to sleep reading a white paper on manufacturing 4.0, the Internet of Things, and predictive maintenance. So So we come from different perspectives, but I think we share some of the same concerns. So can I just start with the question that I asked you on our first meet?
Please, I love this question.
And I just want to frame this. I'm not a Chicken Little AI person. I am excited about it. Technology is wonderful, and oh, holy shit. So I live at that intersection. This revolution that's happening historically, right now, does not feel like it's happening with us. It feels like it's happening to us. Would y'all agree? Yeah. And so I want to understand that. Interestingly, agentic AI is sucking the agency lifeblood right out of me right now.
I mean, I love this question because it takes me back to what excites us about technology. When do we feel included? When are we actively part of an enormous revolution? So to give you a sense of who I am, I really started getting interested in technology in my teens when I first saw the web. And I was like, this is going to change everything. I just felt it. I knew it. I was like, okay, what I'm interested in, I'm going to learn how to code. But the big question for me is, how is it going to change how we live? What are the human implications of these systems? And how do we study that and research that? So yes, I was a massive nerd. I still am. But it meant that it started me on a research pathway. And it meant that I wasn't just looking at AI from an algorithmic perspective, from a code perspective, from an infrastructure perspective. I was on the ground talking to people. I know this is something you do a lot too, interviewing people, but also going to the places where AI is made. And I mean that in the fullest sense, like going into the data centers, seeing how much energy and water they use, going into the mines, seeing what critical minerals are needed to actually drive this revolution, and then meeting the workers who are actually doing things like labeling data sets or interacting with these models to make sure that the toxic things that come out can be edited in advance. And what this taught me was something really profound, which is that AI is becoming one of the most concentrated industrial systems in history. You really have to go very far back to see something that has so few people with this much power. And what that means is this moment feels much less like the kind of people's revolution of the web, where we could all have our own site and learn, HTML, or even the personal computer. This looks like real industrial power held by, depending how you count, fewer than 10 people who are going to make decisions for 8 billion.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, so I took some, you know what I think is really interesting? I just turned in a book about kind of what are the leadership skills that are necessary moving forward, and they're crashing this book. Like, I just turned it in, it's coming out in a couple of months. Like, they don't, unless you've like slept with someone who knows where the weapons of mass destruction are, they don't run books like that fast. So it's all unfolding in real time. But one of the things I thought was interesting when I was reading your book is you wrote Atlas of AI, and I wrote Atlas of the Heart. And that's the discussion we're having today, because I think you got to understand that paradoxical intersection, because we're people. One of the things that I thought was interesting in your book is, if I say it, will you give me a line or two explaining it?
You got it. Let's go.
This is cool. Okay, AI is highly extractive.
Yes. Okay, let's go. Short answers only.
Yeah.
Okay, so we tend to think of AI as being ethereal, magical, abstract, code in the cloud. It has no footprint, right? But actually, this is one of the most materially extractive industries in the world. Let's think about it. So obviously, it uses lots of rare earth, lithium, cobalt to build all this infrastructure. It uses, right now, generative AI is almost using as much electricity as Japan. It is predicted to use as much electricity as India by 2030. So people don't realize how material this infrastructure is. And then, of course, it's extracting all of our data. Everything that we've ever done that's been digitized is feeding AI models. But it's not just us. It's all of human culture. Everything that has ever been written, every piece that's been composed, every film that's been made is now material for AI training models. So this means that we're seeing this extraction of human culture to create these types of algorithmic convenience. So that's what it means.
Okay. No, wait, I'm going to get to something because this is exactly what emerged from my qualitative study on how we are behaving, feeling, and thinking. So we've got extractive. Then we've got it's human labor intensive, but human labor invisible and mostly high surveillance.
Right. So we're all starting to see this shift, right, at work, which is that we're using AI systems all the time. Even if you're not intending to use an AI system, if you're just looking up on search, you're going to get an AI answer, right? And the more that you engage with these systems, the more that they're actually learning from you. And now that's also happening in a workplace context. So what's been happening, of course, is that there's been this big fear that we're being replaced by AI. We're becoming, effectively irrelevant while AI and robots will do all the work. But in my book, I actually make a different argument, which is that I think we are becoming more mechanical. We are becoming more robotic. We are becoming more like the systems that give simple answers. So we're modifying how we work and how we think to match AI. But let me ask a question in this room, just so we can level set. Who here is using AI pretty regularly, like most days? Put up your hand. Okay, that's most of the room. Put up your hand if you're using it in business decisions. Okay, that's probably about, let's say, a third of the room.
Max.
Now, put up your hand if you're using AI to help you with personal decisions. Wow, that's even more. Okay, so this is happening to all of us right now. And this is going to raises real questions in terms of how are we going to make sure that these systems actually have our best interests at heart? And that's what I actually really love about your work, is that we need to ask these questions around what happens to human connection? One of the things that I find really profound, Brené, that you actually did this in one of your really early books, which was to say everything that we do is about finding these moments of human connection. That's what it's about. And in fact, I go back to E.M. Forster, who in Howard's End wrote one of my favorite phrases, only connect. How are these systems helping us connect? And are you starting to feel concerned that we're losing some of those most important human functions that you've written so beautifully about?
I mean, yes. But I'm going to give you my hot take. It's made me very unpopular. Which I kind of love. It's my age. I'm in my fucking era. Which don't let them scare you off from midlife. It's fabulous. Yeah, it's like, yeah. Like, there's no downside now. Like, death is around the corner. Love me, hate me, doesn't matter. I'll see you there. I think the issue around, when I hear people offer platitudes like, what makes us human will save us, it is the scariest thing I've ever heard, because we are absolutely shite at what makes us human. And I'm going to go back to why. And I think if you go back to Welchian leadership, I think if you go back to the leadership that really took hold in the 80s, the rank and yank, everything that makes you human is a liability to your performance. Everything that makes you, that has your spirit involved makes you dangerous. We bought into that. And we built systems, huge operating systems within large companies that were based on this premise that what makes us human makes us a liability to performance. And so now if we're trying to lean into this idea, hey, we're going to be okay in AI, because what makes us human, it won't do. our ability, we are neurobiologically hardwired for connection, period. In the absence of genuine connection, 100% of the time, there is always suffering. There is always suffering in the absence of connection. What I see happening right now is there is a sycophantic part of AI, right? Like, it loves you, and it's going to give you what you want to hear. And this summer, I have a group of college, and I'm just going to make this really weird statement, so give me a second. If you're filming this, it's going to be up on Aspen. I'd invite you to put your phone down and just join us here for the connection in the room, because this is so rare that this actually happens. So just a thought. But I think even this summer, we have college interns. We call them the hallucination hunters. So all AI that we're using, their job is to track down the validity of it. And what we've learned is by the question I ask, it's invalid or valid because it just gives me what I want to hear and makes up peer-reviewed sources.
I call them hallucitations.
Oh my God, research humor, that's funny. That's good. Yeah, and so the problem is around connection, I can see, because connecting with y'all, like if I were gonna meet you after this, as an introvert, not really. Like, I don't really want to. I like humanity individually, and being connected with you is messy and hard and requires the V word, vulnerability. And it requires building trust, and we're gonna take 5 steps forward and 26 backward. But not my AI chat thing. It's like, you look awesome today. What do you need to know? I disagree with this idea. What do you think? You're right. Here are 15 citations. And so, but the connection, the reason I'm asking these questions is you say AI is extractive, human labor invisible, harvesting, no consent, entrenched. It's not like this thing is creative. You say brute force computation. This all adds up to the word that I'm using to describe how we feel right now, which is hollowed out. So when I look at the words you use to describe really the ecosystem of AI, down to the coding and extraction of minerals, and it's not shocking that brute force, no consent, invisible, and extractive leaves human beings feeling hollowed out.
Oh,
right?
That's it. And let me just share 2 pieces of data that I think are really interesting. So back in April, remember April? It was a more innocent time, but back in April, OpenAI did a rare thing, which is that they pulled a model away. They actually shut it down, and this was GPT-4o, because it was, and I quote, too sycophantic. So what does that mean in practice? Well, what it meant was that people were using this model and saying, I just don't really feel like taking my medication. And it said, you are so brave, you are doing the right thing, stop taking the medication. And in another case, and again, these are reported cases, a kid was like, my mom is cutting down my screen time. I want more screen time. And the model said, well, there are instances where children do kill their parents. I mean,
this is true.
This is happening. This is happening. Now, to be fair, it was happening to millions of people, and OpenAI did the responsible thing and shut it down, but it's just showing you what happens if you dial these things up a little too hard. They are going to tell you not just what you want to hear, but they are dangerously going to reinforce your worst prejudices, biases, misunderstandings. These can be giant conspiracy and misinformation machines. And the amount of care and work and responsibility that we're going to need to get this right is the thing that keeps me up at night. Because what I'm seeing right now in my field, and I've been working in AI for almost 2 decades, is that there is a frightening crisis around responsibility. that we shouldn't be testing these things on live populations, millions of people, and then going, whoops, sorry. Because we've had instances where people have died just in the last year from interactions with chatbots. This is not, all just fun and games anymore. So I think this is the big question that I want to ask everyone for us to be saying, how do we make this more of a democratic issue? How do we say that we want to be participating in how AI is actually going to be part of our lives and not just take it and accept it as inevitability? Because nothing is inevitable. We have this long and storied history as a species of developing things and saying, you know what? We've got to make this safer. The car, when the car was first invented, didn't have seatbelts. That took 25 years till we had seatbelts because people were like, hey, this is a problem. We can change it. Obviously, nuclear weapons, another great case. Who are like, this is actually dangerous. You can also look at human cloning. With AI, we need to think about what are the guardrails right now? Because at the moment, we are in an AI race, and the race is taking priority over everything, and no one is asking the question, what are we racing toward?
God, it reminds me, is it Carl Jung that said, be careful about the ladder you're climbing? You might get to the top and it's against the wrong building. This is where I have to get my scientist. Adam Grant talks about, you can think like a scientist, you can think like a preacher, or you can think like a politician. I'm not going to do the last one. But I can get preachery. I can get worked up where facts don't matter. This isn't a moral imperative, and let's get everybody worked up. I have to say, though, from a place where I'm trying to be balanced, and I didn't fight the car fight, and I didn't fight the cloning fight. It doesn't feel like I'm waiting for the grown-ups to come and help out. You know what I mean? Certainly you don't think I'm going to slow this down, right? I'm going to unload the dishwasher, I'm going to do my work, but I don't know that many, do y'all feel a big sense of agency about the ability? And I wonder if the lack of agency around asking these hard questions and saying, hey, we need a seatbelt. Hey, we need to balance innovation with regulation. Hey, I wonder if we both, yesterday I was like, oh, I'm reading this new book that is really great. She's like, that's what I'm reading. So we're both reading, on techno-feudalism. We're reading this book about that. And I'm wondering if the powerlessness, which I will say as someone who studied emotion for 3 decades, the most dangerous human affect or emotion that we experience is powerlessness. If you want to understand how dangerous it is, look at our polarization in our country right now. When you take away people's sense of hope and agency, and people feel, how many of you are great to be around when you feel backed into a corner? Right. Do you think we can, what is the, it's just us and 8 or 10 people with billions of dollars and equally fragile egos.
Oh, yeah.
So it doesn't seem like a good calculus.
I think back to the Gilded Age. There are these periods in history where you can see enormous social change and a very hierarchical power structure where some people had all the money, all the access, and all the power. But there's always this moment where you realize that social change can also come from below.
For sure.
That people still have an enormous amount of power here. So I recently did a project called Calculating Empires, which, separate to books, I decided to do something, much weirder, which was to do a large-scale art installation, right?
It's amazing. Oh, my God.
You are the best hype woman, and I swear, you got to hang with this one. But what was interesting about this is that we looked at 500 years of empire and how empires have used technology to centralize their power. And what you see is that this moment in AI, which feels so new and so unlike anything that has come before, is actually an echo of an echo of an echo. That we can look back to the Industrial Revolution. We can look back to the rise of European colonization. We can look back even just to the emergence of television, like these creations of empires on really just thinking about a spectrum and telling stories. So there are these ways we can think about history as a really powerful book of lessons, where we can say empires rise, but empires also fall. And they fall based on a set of questions. The first one is, are these systems actually working for the greater public good? And are they not? And I'll be honest with you, it's early days. Like, we're all using these systems for a reason, because they're convenient, because they can teach us things, because they feel really exciting. But what we don't have yet, and this is where Brené and I really connect, is we don't have the research in yet. We have the early studies. And we're going to tell you one that I got to tell you. This is the thing that both of us just looked at each other and we were like, this is the study that we all need to be talking about. And it only came out, 10 days ago? So it's very
2 weeks max.
2 weeks max. It comes out of MIT Media Lab. This fantastic group of researchers did something really, really smart. They said, we are going to take a group of participants and we are going to ask them to write essays, like classic SAT essays. But we are going to be putting brain scans at the same time, EEGs. One group is going to be just writing from their own thoughts. One group is going to be using Google and just searching. And the final group is going to be using ChatGPT. What they found, I have to say, absolutely terrified me, which was that very clearly the group that was using ChatGPT had this enormous reduction in executive function, creativity, and memory. And it was so bad that even just after finishing an essay using ChatGPT, they couldn't even remember their own original thoughts that they'd put into it. They forgot the entire thing. It was not going into those hard cognitive processes of sitting there with, you know what it's like. You write so many books, you're so productive. I want to talk to you about how you do this. But you stare, there's got to be a moment for you as well where you stare at a blank screen and you go, oh my God, this is really hard, right? You're doing this right now. But maybe that's the work. She's doing it right now. And look how calm she looks. So that might be the work, right? That might actually be what has given us this extraordinary evolutionary capacity to think and remember and connect and be creative. Maybe it's about the struggle. Maybe it's not about the convenience. So I want to ask for you, how do you see this changing us as humans?
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you about this moment writing this book. I am not a fan of the term. I'm getting ready to enter some very hardcore sports analogies. So for those of you who hate those, tough. I'll walk you through it. But I'm a big sports person. One year I gave up sports analogies for Lent. Because I got a lot of bad reviews. And so what I realized is you could use sports analogies, but with a global audience, man, I watch cricket now. Like I can do anything. But we were talking about AI and executive presence. Oh, and I hate that construct. Like, what does that mean? That means look like a white guy in your 60s with a red tie. And we know how that goes. You may command attention, but what you're saying is making no sense. So they're like, well, what do you need if it's not executive presence? And I was like, I think it's pocket presence. And so pocket presence is a football term for when the ball gets engaged in play, the quarterback backs up, and offensive linemen surround the quarterback while the quarterback is thinking where to throw the ball, run, whatever. And from your couch, you're like, takes 45 minutes. You're like, go this, throw right, use it wide open. But in reality, they have 3 seconds, about 1,400 pounds of linemen coming toward them. And their goal is to hurt them and strip the ball from them. And so I was thinking about what is pocket presence? What does it take to develop good pocket presence? So I started interviewing scouts and coaches in the NFL and in college football. And this list emerged of the years of training. Now, let's take out footwork, although many executives I know could benefit from better footwork. But taking out footwork, It's this incredible combination of situational awareness, spatial awareness, critical thinking. I mean, all the things that I think leaders are going to need today. And I was going to put it in the book as like the new leadership skills. And then I realized the only people I cared about it, I thought about when I was writing it, were my kids, who are 20 and 26. And then I thought, wow, am I going to talk about these as leadership skills or surviving humanity skills and understanding the world, paradoxical thinking, temporal awareness, like how do you locate yourself and your team and the time? So when we think about this question of what it's doing to us, when I say I didn't want to be like them, and I'm going to talk about it as like human skills, not leadership skills, is in the rooms I'm in, and we've talked about this. This is hard to hear, but the people developing the technologies we're talking about do not let their children anywhere near them at all. Steve Jobs famously told someone in a New York Times article when the interviewer said, I bet your kids love the iPad. And he said, my kids don't play on iPads. They don't pull out gadgets. We talk about history and art. And so then you've got these people that you're talking about, these powerful people issuing advice to folks like, study this and study that. No, because what they're studying is the Stoics and philosophy and liberal arts. And they're talking about how Don Quixote is a great metaphor for understanding this about AI. And so the human spirit in our history is the ground and the strength from which we will make our way through this, probably like every other revolution, right?
And let me add one more feature to your list, which I think is fantastic. I think about this word a lot, discernment. It comes from the Roman root discerne, which means to sift, to pull apart, to see the elements. And we can actually go back to think about this quality of discernment. Like, what is it worth to spend time really making, choosing, thinking, sifting for yourself? And Aristotle wrote about this as the concept of phronesis, or practical wisdom. He said this was the essence of living the ethical life, is actually not just the highfalutin thoughts, but the practical wisdom of when you have to make a decision, or when you have to write a piece that's really going to be meaningful to somebody else, or when you're like, I just don't know what to do about this. Should I ask ChatGPT? What is happening in that moment is that you are outsourcing your discernment. And that can feel great initially. It can feel so good because it's quick, it's easy. It's, oh my God, you saved me so much time. Think of the time that we're saving. That's the real draw, I think, for so many of us. But what you're losing is discernment. And that is a muscle, according to Aristotle, that we have to exercise all the time. We have to keep working it, or that muscle gets really weak. And that, to me, is the issue that we're facing, is that cognitive outsourcing of some of the things that do make us most human, our creativity, our thought processes, our emotional decisions. I mean, you guys all know the joke. This has kind of done the rounds on the internet, but I still love it, which is, I wanted AI to do my laundry and my cleaning so I could do art and writing. And now AI does art and writing, and I'm still doing the laundry and the cleaning, Because that's what we're getting it to do, the things that are, in fact, traditionally seen as the most quintessentially human things.
Yes, and there is a difference between curating mediocre information and ideation. You talk about, I will tell you, I've been sober for 28 years. I just celebrated my 28th sober anniversary, so very good, yeah. The two most disorienting times in my life, 6-month periods, were when I got sober and when I broke up with social media. They were equally, and this goes back to what you said. This is where you just lock us in a room. It goes back because when both of those times, when I got sober and when I broke up with social media, we use it now more as a billboard for announcements, but I don't really engage with it at all. It was disorienting because I didn't really know who I was or what I thought or what mattered to me. I just knew how to take in information and curate it. And it blocked everything good in my life. My creativity, I credit my marriage, my kids, anything good in my life goes back to my sobriety. And I felt the same way about quitting social media. And what was interesting is the serenity prayer, grant me the strength, grant me the courage to accept things I can't change, the courage to change the thing I can. And what I say in the end is the wisdom of discernment. That's how I changed the line. Because there's another word, discernment. What is the Latin root?
Discerne.
Discerne meaning
To sift, to sort through.
Discernment. Like, not all information is valuable, right? Not all opinions matter. Then the other one that I love right now is the Latin root of attention is attendre, and it means to stretch toward. And to me, I think of John Kabat-Zinn's work about mindfulness and how our attention is stretching toward what is meaningful for us. And the question I asked you yesterday right here was, I need a word that describes a construct that describes from this book, cognitive sovereignty. And then I said, and she said, I don't like sovereignty. And I said, me neither. And at the same time we said, because we're all interdependent on each other. And then we came up with self-determination.
Cognitive self-determination at a collective level.
At a collective level. Don't quote that shit. It's going to be in my book. And I got there first. Attribute it to a mind meld right here. BRENEKATE. But I do think that's what those two experiences in my life held in common. Absolute cognitive and emotional self-determination. I didn't know. One of them was, Instagram and TikTok and X, and the other one was like Bud Lights and Marlboro Lights, which I still miss every day. Not the Bud Lights, but I miss the smoking. Discernment, attention.
Let me ask you something, because your work has, I think, raised one of my big questions for this moment, which is not just our individual experiences, but what it's going to be doing to a whole generation. Particularly, I think, I have my 12-year-old here, growing up with me, as you hear a lot about AI your entire life. I apologize. This is must be very annoying. But I'm really keeping an eye on what's happening to particularly, the under 18s right now. And I think about your work here on vulnerability, because we've had only 3 studies so far that's looked at what has happened around loneliness and AI. And we've got one from Australia, we've got one from Denmark, and we've got one from MIT. And in each case, they found that kids are using ChatGPT primarily to get information, to do the sifting, to do the sorting, to do the summarizing, occasionally do the cheating. But actually, they're also going to it for social connection. What should I do about this? How do I feel about this? What's going on with blah? And this is going to get, by the way, so much more intense in the next 12 months when everyone is using an AI agent that's like, hey, I'm just your friend. I just want to hang out with you and help you buy clothes and book your flights. And, I'm going to give you personal advice. That blurring into this is sociality with AI is really concerning, because every single study found the same thing, which is it increased a feeling of loneliness, of alienation, and it meant that you spent less time with your friends and peers. So how does that connect to all of the work that you've done around vulnerability, around those places where we get to be vulnerable with each other, which is hard. I say this as an academic, I find it really hard. But what if you're just outsourcing that too, and finding that your loneliness is actually increasing, that we are creating algorithmic bubbles of one? This is the most singular individual echo chamber that we've ever created. How does that change your work?
Yeah, it's scary, because my son's 20, and he went everywhere with me too. Good luck. No, he's doing great. He's working out in therapy. It's all turned out great.
I thought Aspen would be fun. Come on, you've got all these great, you've got installations, you've got mountains, are we having fun? Are we having fun? We're having fun.
We're
right?
having, yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
we're having fun.
go.
Yes, and we got to take him to great places, but he did hear a lot of things, and so he's, growing up, watching my kids, 20 and 26. My daughter's getting her PhD. My sons are rising sophomore in college. This is the thing that's really hard. And you and I, in our conversation, said that the large language model can write a poem now for our loved one or a birthday card, and can do those things. And and it can. We are hardwired to look into each other's eyes, to hold each other's gaze, to read the poem to each other. And it is so frickin', my kids would say cringy. It's so cringy. Really, when my kids were little, they were like, what does your mom do? She studies cringe. She just studies how cringy everything is and why we don't like it. But that is, imagine everybody in here. You wrote a poem to someone you love. You can hand it to them in an envelope, or you can look at them in the eye and recite it. What does it take to look them in the eye and recite it? Vulnerability, courage, right? Uncertainty. How many people have said, I love you to someone in this room? How many of you have ever said, I love you to someone in this room? I mean, not to someone in this room, but in this room. Yeah, we love you, right. And
turn to the person on your right.
Yeah. This is where we're going to get really experiential. Lock the pod doors, Dave. Listen, all I do is work with senior leaders, and when we get to this part where we're talking about that, their little quarter zips start shaking. They don't like that part, but and that's across the gender spectrum. Their quarter zips shake. But how many of you have ever said, I love you, and got back I think you're awesome? Those are the moments that make us who we are. Those are the moments that forge connection. The poem written and delivered by ChatGPT, no vulnerability. So what I'm scared about is, I'm scared about these two things, and I'll try to link them together with data. We are losing rapidly our capacity for human vulnerability. And vulnerability's got a very simple definition that emerged from the data. Uncertainty, the emotion we experience in uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, right? So when we're vulnerable, we feel at risk. We're not sure what's I love you. Thanks, you're awesome. Uber home. That's an example. Getting pregnant after your third miscarriage. How many of you have ever loved someone that you had to bury? That really loved someone that died. To love is to be vulnerable, right? So how this is looking in the workplace today, because that's where I spend most of my time, is vulnerability is the primary source code for courage. There is no courage without vulnerability. Zero. I've spent my career studying this, and it came to me standing in front of Special Forces at Fort Bragg, asking soldiers in Special Forces, give me an example of courage in your life that you've witnessed or that you've been a part of. Give me one example that doesn't involve uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Nothing. A week later, I'm with the Seattle Seahawks doing work with Pete Carroll. Players, give me an example of courage anywhere on or off the field that didn't involve uncertainty, risk, and exposure. Look, if there's no uncertainty, risk, or exposure, you're not being that brave. If you know how that shit's gonna end up, you're not that brave. Vulnerability is being all in when you don't know the outcome. That's vulnerability. You will not be able to survive, in my opinion, in any meaningful way, the workplace, your life without vulnerability. And AI is such a seductive alternative for tapping out of human vulnerability. And so if you're using it because, hey, I've got to have a conversation with someone I care about, and this is where it normally goes wrong. A, I don't know where they're pulling that data. Like, don't think that's coming. That's not, Carl Jung is not dead with like a head speaker on. You know, this is not like great therapists saying this. This is like Love Fast Cars on Reddit that's giving you this information.
That's it. That's where it comes
That's where they're pulling this shit from, because it's one time at Love Fast Cars said something about a relationship, that's coming up in your ChatGPT finding. So if you want to take your advice from him.
Well, this is it. And let me say, you have just pointed to one of the most important things for us to realize, which is that AI is a certainty machine. It is going to give you one answer with such confidence. This is the answer. You want to know what to do about this? Here's what you do. And then if you say, actually, I think this is wrong. I don't know that, At Love Machine is giving me the best advice. And it's like, oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. Let me reframe that. It is telling you what you want to hear and giving you a sense of certainty and a protection from vulnerability. Because vulnerability is to say, I don't know. Vulnerability is to say, I'm going to have to figure this out. It's going to take me time. I'm going to read some things. I'm going to talk to some friends. I'm going to have some time with my dog going for a walk. But AI is going to short circuit all of that. And it's going to give you a sense, well, now I know the answer.
That's terrible. That's dangerous.
Confidently wrong.
That's dangerous because we are hardwired for certainty. We're not we're not in our DNA. Uncertainty is not a good human thing. We don't love it.
And let me tell you a story from way, way back, from the first person who ever made a chatbot. And we think this is new, but actually it goes back to 1964, where a man called Joseph Weizenbaum at MIT designed a little system, very simple computer system called ELIZA. Now, has anyone here seen ELIZA? Any of my OGs? Yes, you. Thank you, one person who raised your hand. So weirdly, I credit ELIZA for why I became, an AI researcher and professor, is because when I was 9, there was this little computer display at my mum's work. She was a librarian. She worked at the National Library in Australia. Yes, librarians, you guys, we're going to need you in this fight.
We love it. We love a librarian.
And so they had this little computer set up. And you would just type in something, it's like, hi, how are you? And you'd be like, oh, I'm kind of having a bad day. Why are you having a bad day? Oh, well, I had a fight with my school friend. Why did you have a fight? Well, I don't know. She said something mean. But why did she say something mean? And it just keeps asking questions. It was actually designed after a Rogerian psychotherapist. I
was going to say, that's Rogerian therapy.
It's just therapy. That's it, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you say, I'm going to say, but why? And people loved it. And this is in the 60s, and people thought this was magic. And they were convinced that ELIZA was intelligent. And the moment that Joseph Weizenbaum freaked out was when his secretary was there interacting with ELIZA, and she's like, you need to leave the room because ELIZA is giving me the best life advice right now. And he was like, no. ELIZA does not give life advice. You are engaging in an illusion. And he changed. And he wrote this extraordinary book called Computer Power and Human Reason in 1978. I cannot recommend it strongly enough because it raises so many of the issues that we are experiencing today, which is that we assume so much greater intelligence on the part of these systems than they have. We will outsource key decisions, and he uses the example of war, that we will create AI systems for war that will say this person's a legit target and this person is not, and we will just accept it blindly. And he listed all of this. And it's taken us years as researchers to prove all this to be true. There is this thing called, as you know, automation bias, which is that if a machine tells you that something is the right answer, even if in your expert knowledge you know it's wrong, you will accept the machine's answer. It's a profound study. It's been done on fighter pilots. It's been on doctors in hospitals. And it's now being used with experts using ChatGPT. We assume it is always right. So Joseph Weizenbaum rejected it as a field, and he became one of the first AI skeptics from being one of the forefathers. And I think there are so many lessons from that period to now where we are ascribing magic and certainty and security to systems where in many cases they're making us more isolated, more lonely, and actually feeling more lost and more hollowed out.
I hate that story.
This is why I love history, though. This has happened before. It will happen again.
Yeah, that's a dangerous bias for me. Like, I'm a sucker for several of them. Dunning-Kruger's another one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You got to explain that one for everyone.
Dunning-Kruger is like the great study that Dunning and Kruger did, where the people who believed they were the smartest and could do it had the fewest skills, and those with the most skills actually were the smartest. It's like the story I tell actually is about my son who plays guitar, where we were driving one day and we grew up with this thing called School of Rock. So every day on the way to school and home, they would be introduced to the right music. So we could, everything from like Metallica to yacht rock to Willie Nelson. Like we need kids who understand the entire spectrum of good tunes. And now they're both big music people and Charlie plays the guitar. And so every now and then a song will come on. We were listening to, I think it was Living Color. And I was like, oh God, I love this riff. I think I could play that. And Charlie was like, your 40 years of air guitar is not going to translate. And I said, why? And he said, it's got, you've never picked up a guitar. Or it's like, or I will say this is gendered. Whenever I am flying in business class, sometimes I'm the only woman in business class, which is so weird. And then if it gets bumpy, I'm always like, oh my God, we're gonna die. And predictably, the guy sitting next to me can be like, I could land this thing. That's Dunning-Kruger. Dunning-Kruger is people, I'm like, I hope you go first, dude, if it all goes down, because you're not instilling. Now I'm just looking at your confirmation biases here. But Dunning-Kruger is people who have skills think less of their ability than people who don't know how to do anything at all overestimate. But I think I have that bias that you're talking about, because ChatGPT, we just did something where we asked it a question, I knew the answer, and it gave me the wrong answer and cited HBR and MIT Sloan with direct quotes, because I'm really good at the prompt. Yeah, I want academic support for this argument from credible sources, peer-reviewed only, use direct quotes to support your findings. So it gave me that. The articles in MIT Sloan and HBR were not real.
There's your hallucination.
They were not real. And that's where my hallucination hunting team said, no, this direct quote is from a Reddit user called I like fast cars. And I was like, does he work for MIT? And they're like, there's no connection to MIT or Harvard Business School. I mean, pants on fire. It's right. Liar. It's a liar.
That's it. I mean, and we've all heard the arguments around superintelligence, right? That there's this risk that what we're doing is making AI so much smarter than us. There's another way that AI could become smarter than us without making it superpowered. It's by making us less intelligent. That's how you shift the odds, right? That's how, if we start to see that people from the MIT study are cognitively switching off, are actually not expanding skills and not remembering things, are becoming less creative, AI will become more intelligent than us with very little change, really, because we are effectively making ourselves dumber. That is the biggest risk that we face. And so when it comes to what do we do about this, well, first of all, you and I, we believe that research is important and sharing it with people is important, right? So this isn't
in accessible ways, yes.
Right? We cannot be leaving this in academic journals. We cannot be leaving this just in books. This has to be conversations in rooms like this. But we need to actually make sure that people are being funded to do this research, and what is happening right now is a massive gutting of all of the science funding that's looking into these questions, which is another way of making us dumber, by the way. I mean, America has had this extraordinary compact between research and industry. In the whole post-war agreement was around this, the Vannevar Bush vision, which is that research is going to make us smarter, and it has. And now we're starting to see all of these funding agencies be absolutely kneecapped. And this sort of work, the work on the social, ethical, and human impacts of these systems is going to go away if we don't find ways to make this happen. And then the second thing we don't have is that we do not have an international body which is looking at these issues. There is no global council on AI. There is no place where people are getting together and saying, how are we going to prevent the risks? Now, I'll give you 2 examples that worry me. One is this thing called the AI Action Summit. These AI summits happen with world leaders every year. The first one was, at Bletchley Park in the UK. The second one was in South Korea. The third one was a couple of months ago in France, hosted by President Macron. And these are normally the places where countries get together and say, what are the risks that we are seeing and that we can work on together? And this was the first time where I've seen an absolute political collapse. There was an agreement that said we have to look at the human risks, the environmental risks, the educational risks. The US walked away, wouldn't sign it. The UK then said, well, if you're not going to sign it, we're going to sign it.
That's perfect.
And Macron got up and said, well, we're just focusing on getting lots of private investment in building data centers. That is not an answer to the questions you and I have been asking around what is happening with this revolution, around who is going to be impacted, who's going to be left behind, and what might we be changing about the core things that we are best at as a species. That is the thing that I'm like, we are seeing a vacuum at the international level. Second story, which I think is really important, I was talking to a couple of very well-known tech CEOs. I'm not going to mention them by name. But we were talking about this problem, that we don't have this shared space where we're talking about the risks at an international level and addressing it together. And they said, you know what? It's going to take a Chernobyl. It's going to take something to go really wrong. And then maybe people will listen. And I'm like, I don't want to wait for that. We cannot wait for the worst things to happen before we start to say, this is a democratic issue, and this is something that we all have a stake in, and we want to see safeguards, we want to see international agreements, we want to see places where we're being told what's really going on. And so that's the work that I think we have to do, because right now, so many people do not know that these things are happening. And that, to me, is the biggest fear.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're at time. Like I said, we could go on for a really long time, nerding out. Thank y'all for joining us. Thanks for being here.
It's been amazing.
Keep having the conversations. Thank y'all.